Good day, everyone. I'm Tumo Kedumele, and I'm going to be presenting to you on the nexus between Indigenous people, their ancient knowledge of the night sky, and scientific astronomy projects, which is a study based on the Indigenous San communities in Botswana and Namibia. So this study was facilitated in collaboration with Women in STEM Botswana, Namibia University of Science and Technology, Redbard University, Rhodes University, as well as the Office of Astronomy for Education based in Botswana. So just to look at the background, Botswana and Namibia are countries in Southern Africa that are known for their very low population density compared to other nations. So in both these countries, one can experience unpolluted night skies in most areas, and therefore we do not have a great issue of light pollution. So these countries are homes to ancient San people and their descendants, and these San people currently live a semi-modern life while also holding on to their ancient ways and knowledge of the southern night sky, which was passed down over centuries by their forefathers. So this indigenous knowledge was passed down as a part of their oral tradition, and it's still the case today. Unfortunately, very little of this knowledge has been documented to be shared with the younger generations. So our main objectives with this study was to investigate the cultural connection between the night sky and the San culture, therefore highlighting the importance of Indigenous astronomy in the San communities in Botswana and Namibia, was also to investigate the connection between Indigenous astronomy of the San and modern scientific astronomy through knowledge matching and support, to also promote Indigenous astronomy as a tool for income generation, cultural appreciation, inclusion, and also contribute to sustainable development for the San communities in these rural areas. It was also to contribute towards the documentation of Indigenous astronomy of the San communities in both Botswana and Namibia, and last but not least, to promote the inclusion of San Indigenous astronomy knowledge in basic and higher learning institutions. So, with regards to the research findings in Botswana, we were looking at a San subgroup called the Tsila Tsua, which is based in the Central District, but they originally migrated from the Central Kalahari Desert region, where the Central Kalahari Game Reserve is located. So the migration from their forefathers' lands was a result of the CKGR land dispute with the Botswana government. So this migration led them to mix and settle with other ethnic groups such as the Bangwato and Bakwena, which are in the Central District, but specifically in a village called Serowe, which is east of the CKGR, and this is where we facilitated the study. The San, they currently lead a semi-modern life and are still holding on to their ancient traditions of medicine making, hunting, and using Indigenous astronomy to hunt and navigate their lands. So here we have maps that are showing the location of the Central Kalahari Game Reserve, which is in map 1 in the blue circle. And also we have the small village, which I was talking about, where they currently inhabit or live right now, called Serowe. And on the other map, we have the San distribution showing the Tsila and the Tua group who migrated from the CKGR region. So from our research findings from both Botswana and Namibia, some of the Tsila Tsua San of Botswana and the Hoansi San of Namibia, they continue to use their knowledge of the southern sky to guide their relationship with the earth and to positively influence their daily life. So they use this knowledge in weather predictions, particularly in rain forecasting, navigation, hunting, agriculture, social and political aspects, also to determine time and season, and also for spiritual understanding. So within the Tsila Tsua interpretation of the sun, we have come to understand that to them, the sun was seen as a sign of success or poverty, and they believed that the higher the heat intensity of the sun, the more poverty it indicated. And the sun halo was a significant call for them, which signaled a community call to the royal house to discuss the plowing season. So the sun halo was and is still believed to be an indicator of rainfall, hence a sign of abundant harvest or agricultural success. The moon and the halo, which they called Mwedi, was often linked to the feminine energy or was a feminine symbol to them. So they used the lunar cycles to build community calendars and also to track women's menstrual cycle. The moon halo was seen as an indicator of good rainfall season and a successful harvest. So this phenomenon signaled a community call called Pizo, which was also similar to the sun halo. It's a community call to the royal house to discuss the plowing season. With its appearance, preparations for plowing and planting began. The moon halo still appears annually in September, which is the season still used to prepare for the plowing season nationally. So their interpretation of the Pleiades was that they called it Silimela, which means the rain stars. It was seen as a significant rainfall predictor. The brighter and clearer it was observed, the more rainfall it indicated. It appeared in spring and was often observed as brighter in October, just after the moon halo. If both the Pleiades and the moon halo were observed to be much brighter, it indicated an even more successful rainfall season, thus urging the community to prepare for the plowing season. But if the Pleiades was dimmer, just after observing the moon halo, then the community expected little rainfall. Therefore, this indicated low to moderate success during the harvest season. Their interpretation and understanding of Venus was that it's a star. It's a brilliant celestial source in the evening and in the morning. So as the evening star, it signified the beginning of the night and was called Kopadilalelo, which means the one who asks for the evening meal. And it was a sign of communal relations or sharing evening meals within the community. As the morning star, it signified the break of dawn and was called Naledi ya Masa or Thagamoso or Ntuna or Mphatlalatsane. So as Mphatlalatsane, it was believed to be the one who sends off and scatters the darkness or the night. As Thagamoso or Naledi ya Masa, it was believed to be the one who ushers in the sun, light, or the new day. It was called Ntuna Ketsamaye, which means kiss me goodbye, to signify the love relationship of a couple. To them, Mercury was not given any name, but it was referred to as a companion to the evening star, since it was sometimes seen as a very faint star next to Venus. So the interpretation of Orion was that they called it Dinjali Dikolobe, which means the dogs and pigs. The stars of Orion's sword were seen as Dinja or the dogs and the belt as Dikolobe or the pigs. And this interpretation of the constellation is the three dogs chasing the three pigs. They indicated that they saw it during the summer season and that it had no significant link to agriculture or weather-focused predictions like the other celestial sources. They also indicated that they could identify the Southern Cross and they called it Ditutla, which means giraffes. They observed it in the south direction during the winter season. They identified it as a very large star, as they identified it as four very large stars connecting with the other two stars above them, thus forming a giraffe shaped. They believed that the two brighter stars in the Southern Cross were masculine symbols and the other two less bright stars were feminine symbols. They believed that the brighter the Southern Cross appeared, then it indicated that there will be poor vegetation for the livestock and poverty for the community. So the Tsilatswa interpretation of Canopus, the large Magellanic clouds and the small Magellanic cloud, is such that the Canopus to them was called Naga or Naledi ya Mariga. They called it Naga, which indicated that it was the winter horn, or Naledi ya Mariga, which translates to the winter star. So essentially, it was a signal with to the arrival of winter. They often saw it during winter in the southeast direction. They observed it as a brighter star unaccompanied by other bright stars. They believed that the brighter it was, the more severe the winter would be. Therefore, this raised concern for their livestock welfare and agricultural produce. The SMC and LMC were called Mahakala, which translates to a cluster of stars. They indicated to see them in the southward direction. They believed that the brighter the Magellanic clouds appeared, the greater the poverty. The LMC, however, was seen as a sign of great poverty and was called Tlala or Tala, meaning lack. And the SMC was seen as a sign of good harvest, and therefore it was called Koro, meaning abundance. With regards to shooting stars, they named them Sibaladi Naledi, which means the star counter. They did not believe them to have any great significance to their daily lives, but to count the stars. Although some groups within the San group community believed them to be indicators of a bad omen for the royal house or community leadership, they believed them to be a sign of sickness or death in the royal house. And then their understanding and interpretation of the Milky Way was that they called it Lesagharipana Naledi, which means where the stars are clustered, or Malalatladi, which means where the lightning rests. Some believed it to be a path for their ancestors, while others believed it was simply a guiding path for the stars at night and the sun during the day. Now, looking at the research findings with the Namibia, we are focusing on the Hoansi San subgroup, which is located in the Tsumkwe settlement in the northeastern part of Namibia in the Kalahari Desert. This settlement is found within the Nyanyai Conservancy, and they still continue to live a semi-traditional life there, still preserving their indigenous knowledge of astronomy. Here is a map showing the Nyanyai Conservancy and the Stumkwe settlement where the Nyanyai people, where the Johansi people are found. And then the other side is a San distribution map showing the Johansi San subgroup in Namibia and in Botswana. So the Johansi used star knowledge for navigation and hunting. They used the phases of the moon to guide them during hunting. So they believed that whenever the moon was facing the southward direction, it was a bad luck for hunting season. And when the moon was lying straight, which means it was at its highest peak in the sky, it was a good luck or a good signal for hunting, because therefore the night will be much brighter and they'll be able to track the animals and be able to kill them. But whenever the moon was lying in the opposite direction, which is the north side, it also indicated a bad sign, because it meant that there wouldn't be enough brightness for the animals to come out or for them to be able to track them. The Johansi also indicated to use the stars, particularly the evening star or morning star, which is Venus, for navigation. One gentleman within the community narrated a story talking about how navigation was used in their community, that in the morning when they're leaving their homes to go to the field in the eastward direction, there'll be the star that will be facing their chest, which essentially meant the morning star. And if they turned around to look back into the direction of home, then it would be at their back. So therefore, being able to use that sort of information was a good navigation skill for them. So from both findings, we understood, or we managed to gather, that both ethnic groups do not use this knowledge as much today, although they still continue to pass the stories and the knowledge to the younger generations. They further indicated that the knowledge is currently and mostly used by spiritual healers in the community for the benefit of all in their communities. We moved on to the knowledge matching part because we wanted to understand or gather if they have any understanding of scientific astronomy. And these communities indicated a very basic awareness of scientific astronomy and space technology through recognition and identification of certain constellations, such as the Orion, and being able to identify satellite movements in the sky and differentiate them from celestial sources such as shooting stars. Although they indicated to have a lack of knowledge regarding modern astronomy projects such as telescopes and how to use them, the Square Kilometer Array project in Botswana, and the African Millimeter Telescope in Namibia. Therefore, this urges the need to raise awareness about modern scientific astronomy to the general public and especially to the indigenous people in both these countries. Continuing with scientific astronomy projects, we know that they have the potential and the capacity to support indigenous astronomy growth in Botswana and Namibia. And so far, DARA, which is the Development in Africa with Radio Astronomy, and the Office of Astronomy for Development, has frequently supported women in STEM to facilitate the AstroCamp project, which focused on a research study titled Indigenous Astronomy of the San People in Central Botswana, as well as this current study that I'm presenting. The AMT is currently supporting Indigenous astronomy through incorporating it in its planetarium project, which brings knowledge to children across Namibia. And then the SKA Avian Office of Botswana is currently contributing towards astrotourism development through astronomy observation trainings, which also includes Indigenous astronomy in Botswana. In conclusion, we can say that responsible astrotourism is one tool that can be used to prevent the decline of the richness of Indigenous astronomy knowledge through the continuous use of the original transmission of Indigenous astronomy, such as storytelling, songs, dance, arts, and crafts that can be incorporated in astrotourism activities and programs. Responsible astrotourism can also be used to foster capacity building and socioeconomic development and empowerment programs in these San communities through astrotourism programs that are beneficial to the youth. We also realized that we can use education, development, and documentation to preserve the indigenous knowledge of astronomy through documentation, such as research articles and books that can be distributed to secondary schools. We can also learn to use indigenous astronomy methods as a guiding tool for scientific astronomical observations. For example, the lunar cycle calendar and the general calendars that they have from astronomy. We can also promote inclusion of indigenous astronomy as a module in astronomy or science curricula at basic and higher education levels. And last but not least, we can promote indigenous astronomy awareness through its inclusion in scientific astronomy projects and outreach to ensure that it remains relevant in the new space age. These are references, and thank you very much for your time.